Welcome to all our Junior Book Club members and all the mythology and philosophy fans. My name is Maria, I work in South Dublin Libraries, and today we're going to move on to part 2 on Greek mythos, from mythos to logos. We hope you enjoy it. For the Greeks who lived in the age of Homer, who wrote the epic poem Iliad and the Odyssey, and long before Homer, the word mythos meant logos as story. Mythos was synonymous to epos. Epos in Greek language comes from the verb epo, which means to say, to talk. The mythos teller was a narrator of stories, usually about heroes and superheroes in battles, of myths about how the world was created. Homer was a brilliant storyteller, as you already know. He was the first to put an oral tradition, a tradition of stories that used to be told and used to be sung, into writing. In fact, Iliad and Odyssey, but also Hesiod's Theogony, came from various stories that epic poets called Aidi, or bards, used to sing, using a lyre. They used to ask the inspiration of the muses and sing, and often with a philosophizing mood. The term mythos gradually evolved. Later societies started to challenge the traditional stories about the mighty gods and the mighty supernatural beings passed on from generation to generation. They started to ask more why questions. Mythos will be defined as an untrue story by the ancient Greek historian Herodotus and by the philosopher Plato, for whom the use of dialectics is the way to reach truth. And here some of you may wonder, what about Plato's allegory of the cave? Could it be also considered to be another sort of mythos? Or those of you who devour history books might argue that the Greek historian Herodotus owed so much to the inspiration of poets and storytellers to write his histories. As we also discussed in the previous session on Greek myths, with the creation of the first city-state, polis, in the classical period, from the end of 6th century BC until the 4th century BC, the society had started to challenge the old traditional myths. At the same time that rituals remained a very important part of the citizens' everyday life. Now, it was upon the stage of the theatre of Dionysus on the south slope of the Acropolis hill that these myths were reenacted in another type of ritual, for the citizens of the polis to enjoy them and to learn from them. The goal was for the citizens to feel for the tragic heroes in this place. By doing so, they could feel how fragile life can be for themselves for everybody in this world, and so experience what the philosopher Aristotle called catharsis, a purging of pity and fear. By experiencing this feeling, they would become more sensitive and respond to what is happening in their own lives and in their polis. This way, they would become better people and better citizens. have some fun now and move on to classical comedies. According to Aristotle, comedy, komodia, represents men as worse than they are in real life, whereas tragedy, tragodia, shows them better. So let us think about it. If men in comedies are supposed to be worse than they usually are, might comedy have the power to express truths that society hasn't possibly fully accepted yet? Instead, it welcomes with laughter a comic world enacted upon a stage. Aristophanes is thought to be the father of comedy. In his comedies, the audience is often drawn into action. The stage becomes a space where certain actions are collectively criticized and satirized. The playwright Aristophanes in his comedies, for example, was making fun of self-important men involved in politics, in literature, and in social life. Take some time to think of all the above and imagine how particular myths in your mind could have been possibly reenacted upon a comedy stage in ancient Greece. Really? Are you trying to tell us that an actual mountain called Olympus, where 12 anthropomorphic gods live, truly exists? Okay, Dionysus has fled to the real world. Finally, some common sense here. Come on, he only ran a tiny bit wild. So these 12 immortals live happily ever after drinking a juice called ambrosia from a cup of immortality? Well, no, they're not happy with living happily ever after, so they've decided to rule upon us and torture our poor mortal lives. They would appear in misty clouds and whisk heroes away, in the epic of Iliad, for example, and they also do other horrible things like turning people such as the ingenious weaver Arachne into insects, and the beautiful Medusa into a monster. But we bet you know these things better than we do. It was a long time after Homer, in 414 BC, when they would still be sitting in their slim golden bums, wiggling their immortal snotty nostrils, trying to sniff roast chicken or lamb on the spit that humans have been cooking in the mortal zone. If you don't believe me, check Aristophanes' satire called Birds, or Mythos in Greek. Check out for the children's version, please. Through humor and satire, the playwright Aristophanes recreates another myth that challenges the power of the gods, but also shows the arrogance and vanity of the humans when they become corrupt by power. Would you like to talk about one of his amazing plays? In his play The Birds, two Athenians, fed up with their lives in Athens, managed to reach the world of birds. The birds got really angry. They remembered the harm that humans have been doing to them and still did and do. But the two Athenians managed to persuade the birds to agree that the humans and the birds come together and build a huge wall, a city up in the skies. They suggested that they build an enormous wall 600 meters high and so have the birds put their rain on the mighty gods, so that they no more poke their spotless noses where it's not their dirty business. Well, they will now be enjoying the skies for themselves. And they would call the city, guess how? Nefelocoquia. Nefelocoquia, Clarkakulant, or sometimes Kokunebulopolis. And so it happened. They started to build a wall. But guess what happened in the end? Those who were dreaming about a world of great freedom ended up realizing that they wouldn't mind becoming the new dictators of the new city and rule over the others. Oh, the sweet pleasures of power. Want to learn what also happened to the gods? Well, the gods were now starving because they wouldn't sniff the smoke from the sacrifices down the mortal world. So they flew to Nefelocoquia, or Kokunebulopolis, and brought back some order. For these, they sent goddess Iris first as representative, and then Poseidon and Hercules to meet the birds and come to a compromise. Now it's your turn. Imagine that you are the new Aristophanes. How else would you rewrite the myth of the birds? Send us your ideas at ballyrone@southdublincoco.ie. So in this part 2 of our session on Greek myths, we have by now moved on to the actual classical times in ancient Greece, to Aristophanes' times, hundreds of years after Homer, when man has created poetry and art, science and philosophy, and gods now stand for concepts such as victory, Nike, hope, elpis, strife and discord, eris, power, kratos, justice, diki, harmony, harmonia, prosperity and fortune, tichi, wisdom, sophia, goddess Athena, straight. And it was at that time when societies had started to pose deeper questions and to use satire that the sun rays of philosophical thinking were shining in the city, and when logos as reason had been born. However, as we have already seen in both part 1 and part 2, myth was never abandoned. In mythology, one can trace the roots of philosophical thinking. Philosophy, after all, comes from the words phileo and sophia. Phileo means to love, to welcome, and sophia means wisdom. As the philosopher Aristotle wrote in his work Metaphysics in 350 BC, even a lover of myth is in a sense a lover of wisdom, that is a philosopher. For myth is composed of wonder, which means that myth makes us feel in awe of the mysteries that surround the creation of the world and raises questions about life, the cosmos, human behavior. Now let us go back once more to the original understanding of mythos as narration. Oral stories that poets, travelers, actors, everyday people used to narrate on their route from one place to another. If we understand mythos in this way as a narration, historia, then we come to realize that it is always in a state of becoming. It is enough to think of the endless versions of classical myths we've seen in books and in films Understand why. If this Can there be as many variations of myths as there are stars in the sky? So myths are never static. They constantly change. According to the societies we live in, they reflect different values, the way societies are, the values that they place upon human life, the way man connects to nature and the world around him or her. We all create our personal myths, our personal story. We all create our personal myths, our personal stories as well, which we draw from the collective memory of humankind, from our own personal experiences in our life's journey, our deepest fears and questions about the world that have been left unanswered, and of course, from the way we question our society's changing values. So here is a question for you. To close this part of our project, should the Greek myths be understood as the best example, a fixed world which should never change with the power of our imagination? Should we read them this way? Or shall we reimagine, sometimes present the funniest side of these myths, as Aristophanes did, and as many recent authors such as Rick Riordan, for example, whose books we've been discussing at the Junior Book Club? Oh, wait a minute, who is she? And where is Perseus? Think of Rick Riordan's books. Which was your funniest chapter and why? Send us your thoughts at allyrone@sdublincoco.ie. Think of some hilarious chapters from Rick Riordan's book, The Greek Heroes, like Perseus Wants a Hug, Psyche Ninjas, A Box of Beauty Cream, and a few others. So we've reached here the end of part 2. From Mythos to Logos. Thank you very much for listening up to the end. And we look forward to seeing you next time on our third part, which will be focusing on an amazing myth, the myth of Eurynome, on the creation of the world. This is really exciting, so don't miss it. See you very soon. Bye.